All right, the purpose of this video is to demonstrate how to set up OpenWRT in a VirtualBox environment to use as a router. So let's get started. To begin with, you're going to need at least 2 NICs or network cards on your device. It doesn't matter if they're USBs, Ethernets or built-in Ethernets, but you're going to need 2, one of them to receive internet and one to provide your routing Ethernet, which can then go into a switch and off to your network or to a single server, which is what we're doing. And now let's get started with the process. Okay, to start with, we're going to go to File and Host Network Manager. Now, by default, VirtualBox comes with a host-only Ethernet adapter. We could modify that, but for purposes of this demonstration, we're going to create a new one just in case that affects anything else in your world. We don't want to change anything. So we'll create a new host adapter. Now that will take about 20 seconds. In my case, I cut the video short. Now it calls it number 2 and it assigns it a subnet of 200. We're going to change that for our purposes. We'll just make it a random number like 60. You could make it anything you want. And we're going to put it as 2. That last octet we're going to make 2 instead of 1. And the reason we're going to do that is because we want the OpenWRT gateway to use number 1. So with that done, we'll switch over to DHCP server. We're going to make sure that that is not enabled. If we were to enable it, we want to make sure that is not enabled. So uncheck that and apply. And close. Okay, we're now going to move on to creating the virtual machine that will hold OpenWRT. So click New. Let's give it a name. Decide where we're going to store it. Choose Linux from the drop-down, and we're going to choose Linux 2.6 through the 64-bit version of that. So we're not going to choose Ubuntu. OpenWRT has its own variation of Linux, and that's what we're going to select. 1 gig of memory, we are told, is more than enough. And we are not going to create the virtual hard drive right now. We'll talk about that in a minute. All right, the next thing we're going to do is go to OpenWRT's releases at that URL. And we'll find the latest release. Now we could get into some of these other revisions, but we're going to go with the latest whole release of 21.02.3. We are then going to choose targets, x86, and 64-bit. And we'll choose this one here that says generic combined EFI image. And that's going to go ahead and download that file. Okay, we'll go ahead and open up that zip file. And we will extract it to a folder called OpenWRT. Now we get this error that says there are some data after the end of the payload data, Bob. We get that every time. You'll just ignore it, close it. It works. Close that. Close that. Open up our downloads folder. Okay, there's downloads. There is the file, the folder that we extracted to. There's our file. Now simultaneously, I want you to copy that. Open up your command prompt. We're going to do it as administrator just in case we need it. And we're going to CD, and now you can right-click and paste to that directory. Okay, I'd like you to type the following. You see it says set path and so on, right down, type it exactly as you see it, because that's the path to Windows VirtualBox, and that way any VirtualBox commands we use from this point forward will automatically reference that path, and we won't need to path them directly. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is run a Vboxmanage command, which looks like this. Convert from raw. Format will be VDI. And then the actual file name that we're going to convert, which you can just type in a few characters and hit Tab, and Windows will quote that for you. And the name of the file that we wish to create or convert it to. All right, and that gives us our converted file. You can see it right here. The next thing we're going to do is resize that hard drive, make it a little bit larger in case we need it for extensions down the road. So we're going to run the Vboxmanage modifymedium, type in the VDI file or just OP and tab, and resize 512. And that gives us what we need there. Okay, now a little bit ago we created a virtual machine. We're going to grab that and cut it. And then we're going to find the folder that VirtualBox created, which is where your virtual machine actually lives. You'll find if you right click on it and show an Explorer, that'll direct you to where that file lives, where the machine lives, and then we can right click and paste the VDI file that's ready to go at this point. So now we need to point the hard drive or point this virtual machine storage to that hard drive. So we're going to find the SATA controller, click on the plus sign right here, click on Add. That is in fact exactly where we want to be. We'll add that drive. It tells us it's not attached, so we will choose it, and that gives us a hard drive. In fact, that gives us the entire OpenWRT program ready to go. Let's go ahead and click solid state drive just to give us whatever benefit that might be. All right, we're now going to move over to network settings. Let's click on network, enable network adapter, and we are going to change that to the host only adapter. And we're going to choose the second one, which is the one we recently created on the .60 subnet. And all this can be left as default. And then we're going to switch over to adapter number 2. That's going to be our WAN, our incoming internet. So let's enable that. And we've got to determine, we're going to go ahead and bridge it for sure. And then we've got to determine which, you may have many in the way that I do, or you may have only 1 or 2. But we've got to determine for sure which one of these hold the WAN or the internet source that we want to service OpenWRT. To do that, we're going to go on the Start button and type in NCPA, I believe it is, CPL. Yeah, that gives it to us. And that will open up all your network adapters. And in my case, I know that the router that I want to feed OpenWRT is on a .79 subnet. So that's how I'm going to identify that. And in order to find out what's a .79 subnet, I'll look at this first one. I'll right click, choose status, and choose details. And this does show me that it is the .79. So that's the one I want to feed my OpenWRT. That will be the WAN. Now I have a couple of different routers feeding this particular machine, but that's the one I want, and that is the L218LM. So we'll grab that. That's that first one on the list, so we're good to go there. So that's my WAN, my incoming internet. Now this is the one that's going to be the router. It's going to be the adapter that you might then put in a switch to feed multiple computers, or you may just be feeding a single server, as in my case. We're going to also make that a bridged adapter. And for that one, we will go ahead and use this TP-Link USB adapter. So you can just plug in an adapter on the fly and make it your router adapter as I have done in this case. Now, if I had if I wanted to create yet another router, I could do the same thing over here, and it would be the next router, and it would need its own unique bridged adapter. I might make it the USB adapter number 4 that you see here. For now, I'm going to leave that alone, and go ahead and click OK. All right, so we have all our adapters set up. We have our hard drive linked and ready to boot. Let's go ahead and boot that up. And we'll just choose the first one or let it continue on its own. Now you'll notice a fully booted OpenWRT stops right there at ETH1 and BRLAN. You would think it would go to a command prompt. It doesn't. So hit the enter key and it'll get you there. Now in VirtualBox, I noticed, you don't really get enough information there. Even though I could scale it, it just makes everything bigger. So I don't really have a solution for that right now. So what I do when I type in ifconfig, I just go ahead and send it to a small file. In this case, I'll call it test. Vim comes with OpenWRT by default, so I'll just vim test, and that'll allow me to scroll down and see what we're dealing with here. You'll notice by default, OpenWRT comes with a gateway address of 192.168.1.1. So that's how we would get to the GUI or the UI of OpenWRT. We're going to change that. You can see ETH1 down below shows us that it is on the 7.9. It's been issued the IP address 79.73, so that's great. Everything looks good, but we've got to change that 192.168.1.1 to the IP address in Subnet that we want our router to possess. So let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that test file. Clear that. Now you'll remember earlier we set our host network adapter to 60.2 here so we could leave room for making this one 60.1. That's the gateway that we've chosen to use for our router. So we'll go ahead and run the following command. Just like that, and hit enter. Now we can take a look at that to make sure it's stuck. Wrong command. I needed a UCI show in front of it, and that shows us that is our new gateway IP for the router. Now we've got to do a UCI commit, and we'll also reboot it for some insurance. Okay, we're all rebooted now. The next thing we are going to do is change the port number of 22. I have an inherent distrust for using 22 on SSH. It leads to problems, so we're going to type in this command. OpenWRT uses an SSH program called dropbear instead of OpenSSH, so the command is as you see here, UCI set dropbear at dropbear 0 and so on and so on. We'll go ahead and press enter for that. Okay, that took. We will now commit it. And now we will reload the SSH program. Done. All right, now we've got to edit the firewall. Now let's scroll to the very bottom of the firewall and enter the following. And I've started this off with the server matter inserted rules. That's just commenting. You can comment whatever you want there, but the rest of it has to be exactly the same. Okay, and you'll have some people that will add an option to enable or disable, but they are enabled by default, so we're not going to add anything else to the bottom of that. Save that. I have verified that that is the correct port number, so now I'm going to go ahead and restart the firewall. Alright, at this point we should be able to SSH into OpenWRT. We will use the username root, which by default has no password. That of course can be changed and should be changed, but for purposes of this demonstration we're going to leave that as it is and bookmark this as and OK that. And just like that, we're in our OpenWRT, and now we've got a lot of screen real estate. We can see exactly what's going on. There's our gateway. This is our bridged interface on the host-only interface, which creates the gateway. This is our WAN, and of course our local loopback. Now our router doesn't show up yet. That's going to be on ETH2, and we're going to cover that right now. Well, actually, we're going to cover it in just a little while. Right now, we're going to comment out the WAN6, because we don't need a WAN6. That'll minimize the number of configurations that we have to deal with in OpenWRT. All right, on that note, we're going to we made a lot of changes, so I'm going to reboot this guy one more time. All right, let's go ahead and open that up again, just to make sure it's running. And now that we know it's running, let's go ahead and bring up our browser-based interface now. That should be available. There we go. And since we don't have a password set right now, we'll be able to log right in. All right, step one is to add an interface. This is the interface that is going to be the router. Interfaces. Add a new interface. Now you could call this name anything you want, you know, business router, something server, whatever the case may be. We are going to use because we're going to be targeting a specific server, and this is going to be a static IP address, and the interface is going to be ETH2, because even though we had added it in VirtualBox, you noticed it wasn't showing up in the command line. It is picked up here, and now we're going to use it and assign it that IP address. So we'll create that interface, and what that basically did was it appended this information in here and some tabs, but the status, protocol, device, bring up on boot was all supplied for us. So the IP address, this is the IP address gateway of our router. So it can be anything you want it to be. We're going to make it 192.168.9.1. Okay, so that's going to be the gateway of our new router. We could make it 50, 75, 200, whatever we want, .1, and that starts things off. That's how our router will be identified. Now, the net mask will be the 255.255.255.0. The WAN gateway is supplied for us. We're going to leave that alone, and it's going to broadcast on that address. That's already been set for us. We're going to leave that alone. Don't touch any of the IPv6 stuff, and don't hit save yet. It's very important we slide over to DHCP server and set up DHCP server. Even if we don't make any, in fact, we're not going to make any changes in here. We're just going to save, but if we didn't do that, your router would not act as a DHCP server, and that wouldn't help you very much. All right, and you see now we have a new interface. since we have 11 pending changes, we're going to save and apply that. And it goes that quickly. Now let's go ahead and verify what we've just done. We'll go back to our SSH login here, right? And let's clear that. And we'll type in ifconfig eth2. And you see we have our new interface. There's the gateway IP ready to go. And one other thing I'd like to bring to your attention, that has to do with the MAC address. You'll notice in settings under network on that third adapter, we have a MAC address ending in A4, which is the same MAC address we have here on the ETH2. So ETH2 lines up with adapter number 3, ETH1 lines up with adapter number 2, and ETH0 lines up with adapter number 1. But that's so you can see how these puzzle pieces fit. And this USB adapter, as discussed, is going to serve our router environment. All right, so right now, you would have an IP address on any machine that you hooked up to that USB adapter that I'm using here. So it would service a switch in the network, and everything would be getting an IP address, a unique IP address on the .9 subnet, but we would not be getting internet. And that's what we're going to cover in the firewall area. So click network and slide down to firewall. Go down to the bottom and click add to create a new firewall zone. And I'm going to give that the same kind of a name as I gave it previously, because that helps tie together the pieces of the puzzle. You could name this firewall anything you want, but since it's for that network, and you could make it again a name typical for the network or whatever it is that you've used, but that's the way you want to approach it. And we're going to accept right down the line here. We're going to leave these unchecked. All right, on covered networks, we're going to select the interface by the same name. So you can see why we like to make the interface and the firewall name similar. And here, allow forward to destination zones. By clicking WAN at that moment, we're going to be able to give internet to this router where previously it would have had none. Forward from source zones, we are going to leave that unspecified. And we'll go ahead and click the save button. And this is what you should be looking at. Save and apply. And you are done. At this point, you have a router, and you can use it in all the ways that you intend. You'll have IP addresses across the network based on a .91 subnet or gateway IP, and you'll have internet ability to communicate amongst each other and an ability to communicate with the internet. Thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.